Hello, readers of Every Word, and welcome to Every Word 365. I'm your host, Christina Munoz-Madsen, and today we're reading Psalms 107 through 110. Welcome to Book 5 of Psalms. Why 5 books, and what are they? I'm including a link to gotquestions.org for more on that. How do you react when you've been unjustly accused and maliciously slandered? David's advice would be this: seek God's help and let Him vindicate you. Let your enemies bring shame upon their own heads rather than trying to do it yourself. Continue to praise the Lord throughout the ordeal. That is in today's My Daily Walk. Wow, speaking from experience, having someone slander you is extremely painful and overwhelmingly emotional. I'm sure many of you have been there. So are we supposed to curse our enemies? No, there's something called the imprecatory prayer. I had not heard of that before I did this study, but I'm including a link from Got Questions on what that is to help explain it. And this is from that link. When David prayed for God to shatter the teeth of his enemies, likening them to young lions pursuing him to his death, he was making the point that God is holy, righteous, and just, and He will ultimately judge the wicked for the evil they do. Jesus quoted some of the imprecatory psalms during His earthly ministry. In John 15:25, Jesus quotes Psalm 35:19 and 69:4. Paul also quoted an imprecatory prayer in Romans 11:9 through 10, which is a quote of Psalm 69:22 through 23. Since Jesus and Paul quoted verses from these imprecatory psalms, it proves those psalms were inspired by God and counters any allegation that they were sinful or selfish prayers of revenge. Using imprecatory prayers from the Psalms today should only be done against our spiritual enemies. That's in Ephesians 6:12. Praying imprecations on human foes is unjustifiable, as it would require taking these prayers out of context. In the New Testament, Jesus exhorts us to pray for our enemies, but praying for their death or for bad things to happen to them isn't what He meant. Instead, we are to pray for their salvation first and foremost, and then for God's will to be done. There's no greater blessing than a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, and that's what Jesus means by praying for and blessing those who curse us. Praying in that manner allows God to work in our own lives to soften our hearts toward our enemies so that we'll have compassion on them for their eternal destiny, and to remove bitterness and anger from our hearts. That is so important. Praying for God's will to be done means we agree with God and are submitting ourselves to His divine sovereignty, despite not always understanding perfectly what He's doing in a particular situation. And it means we have given up the idea that we know best and instead are now relying on and trusting in God to work His will. If a personal wrong has truly been done to us, we seek God in prayer about it and then leave room for God's judgment and trust Him to do what is best. That is the way to be at peace with God and all men. That is very complex and hard to wrap your brain around. So I understand if you read through that and I'll go, what? Just keep at it. Keep praying about it. Maybe do some research on your own about it if it's really bothering you. This is where it takes a lot of faith and a lot of trust of what we're saying and what God's trying to teach us through this Bible study. Now, in my personal case of a very public attack, which included 3 front-page articles in the statewide newspaper, I did what many would do and wanted some kind of retaliation. I was angry, hurt, and definitely wanted to fight back and or even get revenge. And I actually had several attorneys reach out to me to inquire about a defamation lawsuit. But when I slowed down and started to pray about it, I actually began to feel very sad for the people who were trying to, quote unquote, bring me down. I wasn't the first person they'd done this to, and I wouldn't be the last. I began to pray for them, and guess what? That's when I was able to rise above the devastation and carry on. And I really did feel closer to Jesus because he did nothing wrong and was murdered, which is way worse than what I went through. He understands. And it helped me know that leaving that place of employment was definitely the right decision for me and my family. God can use any situation for good and his glory. And it brought me here. I never would have been able to do this in the Bible study and the podcast without leaving that job. And so it was all meant for God's glory, in my opinion. It was just hard to see it at the time. So thankful for my prayers, my faith, and my trust in God that it was all going to be okay. Tomorrow is Psalms 111 through 118. Happy reading. We are heading to Greece in 2025 and hoping you will join us. On the fourth day, we'll arrive at Turkey and have the option to drive to Ephesus, where Paul spent 3 years during his ministry. The impressive remains of Ephesus include the Agora, the theater, the stadium, the library of Celsius, the ruins of the Temple of Diana, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, and many more. Later, you will sail for the island of Patmos. Then we'll walk down to the Grotto of the Apocalypse, the site of the apocalyptic revelations of St. John the Divine. Hope you join us on this incredible trip put together by Travel with Friends.